Hello and happy Friday. This is the after party for, shit, I wish someone told me, the weekly educational conversation that my guests and I have about some shit we wish someone would have told us. And Josh is about to hop on because we're going to be talking. This whole month we're talking about evolution, and so as soon as Josh gets on, I will let him give you a little recap of what we spoke about. And there he is. Hello, sir. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I am here. So, haven't done anything other than say, like, hey, this is what we're doing. So, would you go ahead and just tell everyone a little clip notes variation of what we spoke about in our episode this week?
Sure. Do my best to do a recap. We talked about a lot of stuff in regards to the evolution of relationships. Touched on why we tend to stay in toxic relationships, even if it doesn't serve us. Our inherent need for safety, which drives us to our relationships. Um, Relationships don't always feel good. We have this belief that relationships might are supposed to feel good because of a lie that we're sold basically. That the lie that, the happily ever after sort of lie that we were sold maybe from our Disney movies, if you will, that relationships are meant to feel good. And that just, quite frankly, isn't true. So we get into all that good stuff. It's quite a deep, heavy conversation.
Yeah, it was good. We packed a lot into. It wasn't even quite an hour, but I think that we did a good job with an overview of it. What was your favorite takeaway? Because just thinking about, like you said, like we did cover a lot, and I think that I appreciated that we spoke about how relationships aren't always going to feel good, because I think that when they don't feel good, instead of recognizing that as like, oh snap, like we're growing, like growing pains, that most of us are like, oh shit, something is wrong. And that's not always the case. And so I think that would probably be my favorite part
Mm.
about what we shared. But I'm curious, what was yours?
I actually kind of walked away with a new perspective on relationships. Well, this is something that we talked about in the discussion, but I'd say my perspective evolved a little bit. It's the idea that we often in our relationships we like to think about when things aren't going well. Is it me or is it the other person?
Mm,
And just this idea that that's not often the most helpful question that we can be asking ourselves. So the shift in perspective for me is really beginning to understand that each person in a relationship is like a completely distinct universe, right?
right.
Everybody is unique, and so when we bring our own unique energies into a relationship, we're bringing a unique set of needs, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we reach friction in our relationships when those needs contrast with or are not clear to the person that we're in a relationship with, right? So rather than
Right.
asking, "Hey, is it me or is it them?" A more helpful question is, "Are my needs being met? Are their needs being met by me?" Right?
Right. Right. Yeah, that was something that you brought up that, yeah, was also a key takeaway, because I think, yeah, we do that. We're like, was I the one to blame? Like, how can I fix me? And so we either really internalize this, or we make it something where we point the blame like it's not me. And so instead of like that either or kind of mentality, yeah, it's a different type of energy to bring whenever you are not looking at, was it them, was it me, but rather, like, this is what happened, like what can I do, kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not about right and wrong. It's, does this serve me? Does it serve
right,
them? Right?
right. Yeah. Good stuff. Well, let's go ahead and dive into the polls, because we asked everyone what their experience is on the evolution of relationships. And so I have them here. I'm looking at them. The first question that we asked was simply, do you think that relationships evolve? And we offered the responses of yes, sometimes, and then no. And so I was not surprised. I was pleased that no one said no. 62% of people said yes, and then 38% of people said sometimes. Um, but with that, if it is a sometimes thing for that 38%, then that's something where it's like, okay, well, yeah, like sometimes it might. However, like there's still a no in that, right? Like there's still a no in the sometimes response. But yeah, I was not surprised by those overall. Like, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, not surprised either with any of the poll results, to be honest. But yeah, I think the sometimes response is probably coming from the perspective that change and evolution is not always easy for us, and so I think we've all experienced this. Is probably you've covered this in many of your previous podcast episodes before, but the idea that we get stuck, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I guess the question is, when we get stuck, does that mean that our relationships don't evolve? That'd be that's a whole other podcast right there.
That's a whole
But I
other
think
conversation.
it showed the self-awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. The next question that we asked to follow up to that was complete the following sentence. I think change in a relationship is, we give you four options. So great, inevitable, terrible was an option, and then all of the above was an option. So no one said terrible, but at the same time, 33% of people did say all of the above. So that's inclusive of the terrible, great, and inevitable. The other two responses that we got were both for 33%. So great and inevitable. So um, I thought that was personally interesting just
Mhm.
because um, some people are like looking at them as a positive, right? We have like our optimists, the ones that are like, change is great. You know, we didn't ask, is it a negative or positive change? We just asked, change, period. And so 33% great, 33% inevitable. So I feel like those are probably like our realists, right? The ones that are like, well, I'm not going to pretend like it's not a thing. Like I know that it is, like it's going to happen. I was appreciative that no one said terrible because that would really speak to like the pessimism of all of us. However, we have that in us, and so I think that also for the all of the above, we probably have some more realists in there as well, and that 33% because they're like, it is all of the above. It is inevitable. It can be great, and it can also be terrible. So that's what I think it is. I would have also responded all of the above. What about you?
Yeah, I would as well. Um, I think that change is change. It's potentially great, like you said. It's not always it. That's a matter of perspective, right? And so how people would answer that, I think, would be reflective of their own experiences with change and what
Right,
change specifically are we looking at.
right.
Uh, but one thing is for certain, and that is that change is a part of the growth process. And so, regardless of how you perceive the change that's occurring in your life, there's always potential for change, for loss, um, to create growth that does serve you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, and we spoke about this, I believe, in the most recent episode, but if not, we spoke about it a lot. When we are responding to these polls, I think it's something that is very subjective, not only based on, like you said, personal experience, but also recent experience. Like
Mm.
recently, like even if it's a shitty situation, if I'm in a good place with it, like at that point in time, then I will likely respond differently than if I've just been triggered by it or if I've just been like reminded of some part of it that I haven't worked through or something like that. And so, yeah, um, just wanted to mention that because it's not that like any of these answers are right or wrong. It's just like it's interesting. It's super interesting because these are things that are very subjective to like where you are personally like right now, and like you listening and watching right now might also be like, well, I would have said this, but I mean we don't have a magic wand, we can't go back in time or jump forward, but it's just interesting because maybe something will have changed the next time you ask yourself that question or you are presented with it next time we ask these polls, which we probably won't ask the same ones again. But anywho, just wanted to throw that out there. um, the third question that we asked is which changes more often, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with others, or do both change equally as often? So 50% said both change equally as often, 31% said others, and then 19% said myself. What are your thoughts on that? I want to hear your thoughts first on this one.
Yeah, I mean, 50% split on the 50-50 makes sense, right? Because uh, I would expect that a lot of people would perceive change on in other people as easily as they can perceive it in themselves. If I were to vote, I would have voted on that 50-50 split. Um, yeah, because this is the world that this is the world we live in, right? It's change, constant change all the time. So you can expect that as you're growing and as you're changing, that others will be as well, right? Even if you feel stuck, chances are you're changing.
Yeah. To this one, I was like, I wanted to hear what you thought first, because to me, I was like, so taking it back to that notion that I just mentioned about perspective, like,
Mm.
is it something where I'm perceiving other people are changing because I am, or is it like where I'm kind of stuck, so I'm just thinking that other people are, and so I don't feel like I am either because I feel like stagnant, I feel like I'm comparing myself, I'm not progressing, um, or I feel that like other people aren't leveling up, like, um, is it that? And the same thing, we can relate that to the people, the 19% that just said that they feel change happens within themselves more, because that too could be something where, okay, is that because you think that you're the only one like working on yourself, or is that because you are evolving like out of these relationships at like a really constant pace, and so that the people around you are staying stagnant? Like, is it like your reality, or is it like your perception of your reality? And this isn't to shame anyone, doesn't make anyone feel bad, but it's just interesting and an invitation to get curious about, again, like that subjective perspective. Like, is it the reality, or is it the reality that you believe? Because the truth is what we believe it to be. But sometimes we lie to ourselves. So those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, interesting perspective. Yeah,
That was
I have similar questions now that you mention it. You know that is kind of interesting. Um, I think yeah, it matter of perspective, right?
this is what it's like to be in my head. That, and also I get really distracted. But yeah, so that was my thought about this. That's why I like these questions, like, because number one, I love hearing what other people's experiences, and number two, because like it's always like there's another question, right? There's always like more underneath. Like there's always, things underneath our feelings, our emotions, our reactions, and so there's always more underneath like the responses here. So yeah, those were the questions that we asked. Uh, do you want to dive into what some shit people said that they wish someone had told them about the evolution of relationships, or do you first want to answer the questions that people had this week about relationships?
Let's answer the questions.
All right, cool. So we had for this week the first question. So the question that we asked in the polls: what questions do you have about the evolution of relationships? So the first question: does it come naturally, or is there a catalyst that drives change? I'll let you take it away.
Sure. Yeah. A little bit of both. And again, I think this comes down to a matter of perspective, right? So when we think about change happening naturally, uh, then to me that looks like we're prepared for the change. And whether or not it's a result of a catalyst or not, then we're going to take it on and we're going to go through the growth process, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we are resistant towards change, then that's a different conversation altogether. Sometimes, yes, a catalyst will force change, whether or not we're ready for it. So even if we're resistant, um, then it might feel shitty, and we're gonna have to go through the process. Um, but when we are ready for change, then we can experience growth and move through it. I don't want to say gracefully, but more peacefully, right? Sometimes we can prepare ourselves. I'm just thinking personally now, this is a good, like right now, we're in a bit of a recession in the economy. We're moving towards a recession, and I can accept that times are going to be challenging, right? And the sooner I'm able to accept that and be ready for that change and start making preparations for myself, then the more peacefully I can move through that. Now, if I don't want to face that reality and don't want to face the growth period, then it's not going to feel very natural, and it's going to hit me on the side of the head like a 2x4, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, I think same. Sometimes it is natural, sometimes there is a catalyst. And one of the things that we are going to be speaking about in episode 73, evolution being a choice, is that it doesn't have to get to the point of like absolute shit. Like you don't have to get to the point of a breakdown in order for you to have a breakthrough. You and I have talked about this. And so I think that um, yes, oftentimes that is just what happens because change is so uncomfortable. Evolution is change. And so whenever we think of it in that sense, oftentimes there is a catalyst simply because we don't like change. Change is
Yeah.
scary, it's uncertain, we don't know what's going to happen, even if we consciously know, well, that's probably going to be better. It's something where it's foreign. Like we might know that consciously, but we don't know that like viscerally. And so there are often times, I would say, more often than not, that there is a catalyst, even if it is like a natural evolution in the
Mm,
sense that it's like, okay, um, yeah, like I'm consciously choosing to evolve. It's because something happened that
yeah,
made you want to consciously choose to evolve, whether that
makes
be
sense.
you just got tired of the same old because you've been doing more work, whether that be that you were just like, you woke up one day and you're like, you know what? No, like something needs to change. Um, but I think that, yeah, both are true. But more often than not, I would say, even when it is a natural evolution, that something caused that. Something you were like, let's say if we take it to, relationships, because that's what we're talking about in this episode today, even if it's something where our relationship is naturally evolving, we can take it like to our relationship, like as friends. So our relationship naturally evolves, and it's not necessarily because anything specific happened, but it's because we are both mindful of our own evolution, and as such, our relationship therefore continues to evolve and develop. So yes, it's natural, but we're kind of doing things separately behind the scenes for ourselves that are nudging that natural evolution along, is what I would have to say to that one.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So yeah, I think what I'm hearing is if we trace it back, we'll find a catalyst one way or another.
Yeah, yeah. That yes, that would be a much more concise way for me to say it. Thank you. Yes, exactly. Because things are going to change and evolve, but we might still be doing them in the same way. And so in that sense, it's not really like an evolution. It's just kind of like a progression, if you will, or like what's the word I'm looking for? It's just like a continuation.
The
It's like
next step.
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we're not evolving and growing and like shifting and changing so much as we are just keeping on, or continuing to keep on keeping on. And so, yeah, that's what I would say for that one. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I love that perspective.
Okay, well, thank
I
you.
think
I love that
my
you.
my perspective has evolved a little bit too. So
Well, look at that. See, this is why we do this. The second question was not actually a question; it was a comment. So this person, I thought it was funny, so I included it. What questions do you have about the evolution of relationships? This person said none. This is something I surprisingly understand and accept. but I wanted to include it because I thought it was cool. They mentioned that accept piece because you've mentioned this in
Yeah.
our conversation today about how it's something where it's not, like we can resist and we can fight, like we can like try to pretend like no, it's not happening, but that acceptance piece. We did a whole last episode on accepting your reality. Acceptance does not mean that you are in agreement with it, which I think is a very important disclaimer whenever we talk
Yeah.
about acceptance. Acceptance just means that it's like, okay, I acknowledge that this is the reality right now, like this is the truth of the matter. And instead of fighting against the facts, I'm going to accept that that is what is and use my energy in more constructive ways. So I
Yeah.
wanted to note that because yeah, I think that that's like a cool thing to note whenever speaking about evolution of relationships and that kind of a thing. Anything else you want to add on that? You look
Yeah,
like
no,
yes.
I love that because relationships with others always have an element that is outside of our control, and that is the other
Mm-hmm.
person. So acceptance
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely a key factor, right? When do we move into that state of acceptance and letting the other person be and make their choices, give themselves space for that, uh, rather than resisting it, which I think, as you said, is a waste of energy oftentimes, right?
Yeah, which we'll talk about that to take it on home because I have more to say, and it's in relation to something that someone shared as some shit that they wish someone told them about the evolution of relationships. So yeah, we will circle back. Let's put a pin in it, and we'll circle back to that. Like I'm running my meeting over here, like our Friday afternoon meeting. So okay, the third question, so actually the second question was how to be comfortable with evolving without friends, especially when they're not in that stage yet. Do you want to start with this one? Do you want me to start?
Sure. Yeah, well, no, happy to. With so this comes down to previous conversations I think we've had. I've shared a lot of content on this. I'm big on this one. It comes down to one of our primal fears, which is fear of rejection, right? So we inherently all have a big fear of rejection, abandonment. And I won't go down that rabbit hole too much, but that fear often prevents us from achieving growth, achieving evolution. And in other words, it encourages us to play small. This is something we talked about, right?
Mm-hmm. We
And
talked about this
so,
week.
oh yeah, we just talked about this in the episode. So if you haven't checked it out, check it out for the detailed download on that. But yeah, if you are concerning yourself on whether or not you might be rejected or whether or not your friends are going to accept your evolution, focusing on that will not necessarily serve you. I always like to think about, I know society at large has a bit of baggage on this concept, but thinking about yourself and putting your growth and your healing and your evolution first is not necessarily, it is not a selfish thing to do. It is a selfless thing to do at the end of the day, because when you prioritize your growth and your evolution and you're truly committed to it, then you will be able to better serve others around you and the world around you. And so this doesn't mean that by prioritizing your evolution that you are abandoning your relationships, your friend group. It doesn't look like that. Some people will join you for the journey and others won't. Again, that's outside of your control. That comes down to the acceptance piece. And I think we need to get better at just understanding that,
Mm-hmm.
not letting that hold us back, and just continuing to move forward with that in mind.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I think what came up for me is like it's lonely. And I think acknowledging that your own evolution is a very oftentimes lonely process is key. And then how to be comfortable with evolving without friends. I'm not saying like, fuck them, but I am saying find ones that are where you are
Yeah,
on
you
that
will.
journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you will. And also, don't feel like you can't, because like you said, you're not like leaving these people behind. Like I said, you're not being like, well, fuck you. Like, it's very much something that you're doing for yourself, and by modeling that behavior, you will likely inspire some others. And it's something where you can't keep yourself small simply because you're trying to make other people feel comfortable. And that is some shit that I wish someone would have told me, in not so many words. Like they kind of did, but like, this is from me to you, like listening, watching directly right here, right now. Yeah, you cannot keep yourself small for the comfort of others. And so it's something where just remembering that, I think, is important. Remembering that it will be lonely, remembering that you can't keep yourself small, and finding people who will be your friend during this time will all support with feeling more comfortable with the evolving without the friends that you previously had. Because that doesn't mean you have to not be their friend anymore. It just means that maybe it's time to make some new ones. And that might evolve your relationship with the previous friends. It might not. It will likely change in some way, right? Because you're going to be a different person. But it doesn't mean that, that has to be to the detriment of the relationships that were. And so, yeah, that's what I would say about that. All right.
Yeah, and building on that, I think one thing, just so it doesn't go unsaid, is that as you commit to your evolution, the people that are on that same path or similar path that will walk alongside you will naturally reveal themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Which it sounds like the weirdest thing. It's like, oh, like, what do you mean? Like, they'll like pop out? Kind of.
You'll
Like,
recognize each other.
exactly. You'll be able to recognize them more. This is something that we also spoke about in like is it the choice to evolve conversation. Because I brought up that, is it that they were never there? Like, is it that the teacher appeared, or is it that the teacher was always there and you just never noticed them? So take it back to that perspective concept. And so I think that the same thing applies here. So that's why I bring it up. It's not that, anything necessarily shifts, it's that your perspective changes. And so therefore, you're aware of more possibility. So that is that, which we can talk about. Whole ass another conversation, positive psychology, broad and build, which I want to start doing more about. But yeah, like there's actual science behind how and why that happens. And you are able to see more opportunities when you're in that headspace. So pretty cool stuff. The last question that we got was, can they go back to how they were before? What do you think?
I don't even believe in the concept of going backwards because you can't unlearn or unknow experiences and knowledge, right? So,
Okay.
so that said, you may find that it's entirely possible to go through a period of growth, experience change in your relationships, and then go back to experiencing a similar relationship dynamic on a on a experiential level, so that my relationship with you, let's say we grow this. My fire alarm is going off. I don't know if you can all hear that.
I did hear that ding.
Okay, let's see if that's an actual fire alarm.
I used to play this game when I lived in a high rise. Like, it would be really loud and go off, and we'd be like,
Yeah,
they'll make an announcement if we
let's
actually need to
see.
leave.
There's not a fire, and I'm in a town. Anyways, back on track. So, yeah, so you can, if you're experiencing, the dynamic of the relationship might feel similar, but it doesn't mean that you both are going to forget or unlearn what you've experienced through the growth period, right? And so if you're experiencing that, oh, it feels like we're back to the old dynamic that we used to have, chances are it's grown and is actually stronger in some way.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, I hear what you're saying. I'm picking up what you're dropping. And something that we're going to be talking about next week, the evolution of boundaries, is what happens when then we evolve our relationship and I'm like, things are better. And then the other person starts doing the same old bullshit. Like, see what I'm saying? Like, what about in that case?
Yep. And that, oh, I love that you're having that discussion around boundaries. Perfect. That's a situation that is a result of our own patterning and other people's patterning, right? And so every time you experience a boundary being crossed
Mm-hmm.
or some form of abuse from someone else, you're still collecting data,
Mm-hmm.
and whether or not you change
Mm-hmm.
your behaviors in order to change the outcome of that situation, that's entirely up to you. But at the end of the day, you're collecting data, and that data is doing something to you. I can only hope that you are that is contributing towards creating a healthier situation, right? In that case.
Right. Right. Yeah. So Shannon and I are having that conversation. Comes out Monday, 8 a.m. Eastern, everyone. Episode 72, The Evolution of Boundaries. And I love what you said about how you can't unlearn what you've already learned. And so even if it does seem like, oh shit, we're back here again, it's different because you have done the things, you have tried. It's like you have put the wheels in motion. It worked for a little bit. Now it doesn't because of our habits, right? We talked about that. Like, are you addicted to an old version of yourself? Great episode to check out if this is your question or something that you're like, I'm curious about that. Um, you can't throw up the red pill after you swallowed it, kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
so it's something where it's such an eloquent quote of mine. It's something where even so, like, can it go back to the how it was before? Because if we look at the flip side, like let's say that they evolved in a way we didn't want them to, right? Like, could we go back to when things were all like happy go lucky, right? I think in that sense, it will, like you said, never be the exact same, but you could grow through that. Like, you could learn things from that. If some, shit went down, you're like, I don't really like that, but like, let's work on us. Then that's building resiliency, right? Like, that's overcoming trials and tribulations. If we look at it from that perspective, because I don't know with this question if they were hoping that things would go back to the way they were because some shit happened and now they don't like the way they've evolved, or if it's the opposite where they want things to evolve and they haven't, and they did, and then now they're back before. Like, so I'm not sure which perspective we're looking at this from, but either way, irregardless, I don't care if that's not a word. Either way, I agree with what you said. It's something where we might find ourselves in a similar space, but it will never be the exact same.
Yep. Yeah, I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff. Good questions. These questions have been like the past like couple of months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just it's tough to answer someone's question without them directly to get that full context. And
Right.
so I'm always mindful of like applying a blanket statement type rule. There's really no universal one size fits all solution, right? So
Right.
hopefully nobody's taking any of that to the extreme. There's nuance and there's gray areas, I think,
Yeah.
with everybody's unique situation, right? So
Yes.
this isn't meant to encourage you to do one thing or another. But if you are looking for that kind of guidance, maybe that's a good time to reach out to personal one-on-one guidance.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great disclaimer. Like, this is not the gospel, but this is, some guidelines. Like, maybe. That's why I think it takes us so long to answer these, is because we're not just saying, like, well, here's this clearly. Because whenever I read these questions, I also have follow up questions. And so at the same time, I like that they're a bit ambiguous because I'm like,
Yeah.
well, this
Yes.
enables us to get curious about like other potentials, because I think that that will help more people, because maybe they aren't in the position where they necessarily want things to go back to the way that they were. Maybe they're struggling because they want things to stay different, but they're not. And then, we could also have people who are listening. They're like, well, actually, no, like shit hit the fan, and like I want things to be like they were. Like, that was great. Like, this current like
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
Um, because it takes all kinds. And you know what? You might be both of you might be both of those people at some point in the future. And hashtag same. Hashtag same. So cool. Um, Now let us go ahead into sharing what some shit is that people wish someone told them about the evolution of relationships. So we had 5 responses. The first one, everything changes, it has to, lest it becomes stagnant and damaging to both parties. I have a comment on that.
Yeah. Um, I don't know that
So excited for
things
this.
staying the same or that stagnancy necessarily has to mean that it's damaging,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? But in the context of somebody crossing boundaries and or if abusing or something like that, then yes, some sort of change needs to happen. That's in order for the relationship to become healthy, in order for it to serve you, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's when you need to make a decision uh, about how when do you decide when to walk away, right? When something is no longer serving you.
Yeah. I had a similar initial response when I read this, which was, well, how was it damaging to like both people? But then also I was like, damaging in the sense that they're staying stagnant, like they said.
Oh yeah,
And yeah, like we're not growing. And I'm like, well, in that case, but also, so here's an unpopular opinion. I think that sometimes like you don't have to grow. Like sometimes like you just need to
exactly.
sit. And
Yes,
so it's not up to, like, let's say that I'm in a relationship with someone. It's not up for me to be like, yo, partner, like, you gotta get your shit together and move on. I mean, granted, sometimes we are able to support others in saying, like, hey, let's get curious. You know, you've been here for a while. How are we feeling? Let's do a check in. But at the same time, you can't make that decision for someone else on whether or not they are ready to evolve. You might know,
100%.
like, hey, like, I think it's time. I know you can. But at the same time, it doesn't matter what you think. It matters what that other person believes to be true and how
Yeah,
comfortable they are with doing it. And so, in that way, I'm like, I see what you mean in it staying, in it being, and everything changing or everything not changing, rather, leading to damaging and like stagnant like positioning for both parties. um but also I don't think it has to.
right. And then I think that comes back to our conversation about what's the need, right? What's the real need there? Because I don't know that the most constructive perspective to look at this. I don't think that this perspective serves you, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The
Mm-hmm.
perspective of my partner needs to experience this amount of growth before we could be together,
Right.
right? But the real question is, what do you need as an individual from your partner in order for you to succeed in the relationship, in order for the relationship to serve you, right? And that's a growth conversation right there that's worth
Yeah.
having, but
Yeah.
not necessarily like expecting somebody to commit to their own growth journey before they're ready to it. That's completely outside of your control.
Yeah. Because then I would be, if you're feeling that that's the case, yeah, my invitation would be to look inward. Like, why do you need them to like do something different? Like, what are you looking to, like, exactly like what you said, like what need are you looking to them, what need of yours are you looking to them to meet, kind of
Yeah,
a thing. Like, why do they have to like do the shit? Like, leave them be, leave them be. um Kind of a thing. But then we get into like attachment theory and like all
yeah,
that,
yeah.
which is again a whole ass another conversation. But yeah, so that,
It's a whole ass
lots of
Instagram
comments.
profile.
That is, that is. Yeah, there's a couple of those. Yeah. So lots of comments on that first thing. I definitely see what they're saying, 100%, and also don't know that I agree 100%. I respectfully disagree, like with that one. Um, the next one that people said, some people are seasonal, enjoy the season, and then evolve when necessary. Kind of made me cry a little bit.
Yeah, but I think that's well said. I think I'd agree with that. I'd say that's a truth. The the universe is in seasons. Like there's rotations of planets around the sun. We experience day and night here. We experience biologically as mammals. We are designed to. Let's not get too into biology right now, but we're designed to. Our bodies are designed to respond to different types of seasons, right? So the concept of seasons is part of our experience and our evolution and our psychology. So that's absolutely it. The winter season, what we tend to refer to as the winter season, tends to be when we're experiencing scarcity or challenges or periods of introversion in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for many people, that is less enjoyable than the more extroverted summer seasons of our lives, right? So 100%, you've got to sort of bank that some stages of the journey are going to be more enjoyable than others, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with riding that wave, right, while it's there. And then again comes down to accepting the crash when that crash is inevitably going to happen. The sooner you're able to accept a season of growth, a season of winter, and come to peace with it, then the more gracefully you'll be able to navigate that season.
That was well said. Hard pill to swallow for potentially. But yeah, I agree. So the third comment, beautiful segue, some evolution won't be pretty, but it's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? This is an opportunity to throw out some Tony Robbins. Whether or not you're a fan, one of my favorite quotes of his is that the idea that everything that happens, like the universe is always working in your favor, that the universe is always working for you. Things are always happening for you as opposed to you. And this is a good example of when I would apply that, because even when shit is hitting the fan and change is happening that you are not yet ready for, right? The roller coaster just went down and you were not expecting it. Mm-hmm. You were expecting it to go up and it just went down, catches you off guard, right? When that happens, and it inevitably will happen many times throughout life, it's important to realize that once you get through that, you're going to be able to look back and see the growth. You know, you will experience the growth. It does not always look like loss. Loss is not always the most appealing thing to experience, right? It doesn't always look like it's a good thing, but loss always is creating room for new growth. So if you have a garden that is abundant and you're proud of it, and then half of your crops get taken out, that's going to hurt, right? You're going to lose some of that pride that you identify with. However, you also have a completely clean slate for new opportunities to plant whatever you want. And you can, the sky's the limit. You can plant whatever you want in that garden at that point. Yeah, let's leave it at that. I think that's how I feel about that.
I like it. Okay. The next one says, heal yourself first. What do you think about that one? Yay, nay, comments?
Yeah, I think most airline companies have this, right? You got to put on the oxygen mask before you put on anyone else's oxygen masks, right? So I 100% agree with that concept.
I do not, because I think that oftentimes we can get so disheartened that we don't give a shit enough to heal ourselves, but we do care enough to keep going for others. And so I think that in that sense, yes, it is important to heal yourself first. And at the same time, it is something where just because you aren't doesn't mean that you can't still support other people. And that doesn't mean that you can't, through that experience, start to give more shits about yourself. And so I think that we've spoken about this in this, whenever we had our PowerPoint with Maslow's hierarchy of needs and like the importance of community and relationships. And so I think that, yeah, like it is definitely important to be mindful of healing yourself. And at the same time, I think that it can happen in tandem with you being in relation to others. I personally think.
Yeah, I guess, you know what, and it comes down to universal blanket statements not always serving. I really apologize. I have to step away for one quick minute.
No, go ahead.
Maybe you can carry the rest and I will be here in 20 seconds.
Okay. So we have impromptu. This is fun. Yeah, so that the last comment, some shit that someone told them about the evolution of relationships is heal yourself first. So yeah, I was just saying yes, and also you don't have to. Just because you are still, or just because you are in a place where you are working on yourself, where you don't feel like working on yourself, doesn't mean that you can't be in relation with others, because it's important to, leverage community like when you can, as you need. So that's all I have to say about that. That was really fast. So,
yeah. Sorry, apparently people are coming to test the fire alarm. So,
oh, you were A-okay. I feel like we've been on this journey with you. We've been on the whole like fire alarm journey. So they never did that when I lived in a high rise. Like they just didn't care, I guess. No one ever came to test ours.
Yeah.
They would do fire alarm testing, but like you would get an email and it was just obnoxious like the whole afternoon. But no one specifically came to like my unit.
Well, thankfully this was not a whole afternoon. But I also was clearly not aware of this. So.
Interesting. Well, I'd be writing an email to the board. I'm just kidding. So, okay, last thing. This is what I said I wanted to circle back, put a pin in. So now we're going to take the pin out, I guess. Is that a thing? I don't know. But we are circling back to the comment that we alluded to earlier. And that is the last thing that is some shit someone told them about the evolution of relationships is that it takes two to make or break or evolve a relationship. Now, my former self would have been like, yes. My current self is like, hell no. You could be fucking doing all the things, trying, putting yourself out there, accommodating, not trying, setting boundaries. You could be doing literally all of the things. But like we said earlier, if that other person isn't ready, there's not a goddamn thing you can do. And so I do not agree that, I respectfully disagree with this as well. A lot of respectful disagreeing from my side today, but I do not think that it takes two to make or break or evolve a relationship. I think that it takes two to make a relationship, for sure, because otherwise you're just in a relationship with yourself. But to break or evolve, I do not think that's true.
Yeah. So let's look into this. So let's think of some examples. So if we're in a relationship and I blatantly, so
everything flowers every week.
What's that?
I'll get you flowers every week.
Okay. And so now we've got a good thing going, and you establish boundaries, and we clearly communicate one another's needs and we meet those. And then we reach a point where I just blatantly decide I am no longer going to respect those boundaries or meet those needs, but continue in the relationship, are we both responsible for the inevitable failure of that relationship?
Mm. Okay, good question. This is not where I thought that this was going. Are we both responsible? I think if I don't say anything, yes. Because if I don't say anything, I'm watching us crash and burn, right? The same thing with the other person or with you. Like if you don't say anything, then but it might be something you're not present to, right? You might just be, going back into your old habits. So if I recognize that, then if I don't say anything, then yes, I would be equally responsible for the crash and burn or the demise. I think. What did you think?
Yeah, I don't necessarily. Yeah, I think we're exploring this together. Yeah, if you establish those boundaries and those needs, and you hold to that, and you say,
Mm-hmm.
"This is non-negotiable for me."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, here's the line, and then I proceed to
Mm-hmm.
disregard that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the following week, you come back and say, "Okay, you've disregarded this." I mean, it's never this simple, but let's keep it
Right.
simple.
Right. Right.
You've ignored the boundaries. You've ignored my needs. Um, I've voiced them. I'm holding this. I am letting go of this relationship because it does not serve me.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, you may be ending it on your side,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, but I'm the one who's contributed wholeheartedly to the failure on my side.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. I think that's one way of looking at it. And we can use personal experience. If I'm doing all the things and the other person just is not responding, despite what happens, even if I continue to try to re-engage, then like that's not me. Like so yeah, I think that yeah, it doesn't necessarily take two. Um because that would be a break, first of all, in both scenarios, the one that you just shared and the one that I just shared. And also an evolution. And at the same time, it's something where one party is like doing or not doing, their inaction is therefore the action that is creating the break, um, or evolution to the demise, I think, in that sense. Um, but yeah, I very much think that it takes two to make the relationship because relationships are tough. Relationships are hard. They are a skill, and it's not something where it's all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, it can be, but like we spoke about, that's a lie. Like it's not always going to be like that. So yeah, that's what I have to say. That's what I think about the last one. It takes two to make or break or evolve a relationship. Do you have any further comments? This was a fun little scenario.
It is a fun little scenario.
I heard that. It's fun.
I know it's going to be what it's going to be. Well, you
It's
might
a
say
very fancy bell. It's a very
it's a
fancy
very
bell.
alarming conversation, I think we could say.
There you
Um, yeah, I've never heard that, but apparently it's fancy. Yeah, I would add that it's an interesting conversation because we really get into the weeds on perspective and definitions. And
go.
to me, I don't even believe very much in stagnancy. So no matter what you do in a relationship, both parties, I think, are moving towards something or away from something, right?
Right.
Either
Right.
towards the relationship's growth or away from its growth.
Right.
There's no such thing as 100% equilibrium and stasis because everything in the world around us is changing. We are individually growing in response to the environmental changes that we experience, right? So the earth is going around the sun, like everything is in a constant state of movement and expansion and growth. So the question is, which direction are you going?
Oof. What a great place to leave it. What a great place to leave it. All right, cool. Well, that is all we have. We recapped the episode. We spoke to what you had to say this week in the poll results about the evolution of relationships in your life and what you think about them. We answered some questions and we shared some shit that you wish someone had told you about the evolution of relationships, some of which we agree with, some of which we do not. So hopefully this has been helpful. If you know someone that would benefit from listening to it, or rather, whomever you know that would benefit from listening to it, do send it on their way. I'll be turning this into a podcast so you don't have to watch it. You can just listen to it. And also, I'm going to put it on YouTube later this afternoon. And so you can consume it that way if that's easier for you. Like we said, on Monday, Shannon and I are going to have a conversation about the evolution of boundaries to continue our boundary series. That will be live on YouTube and all podcast platforms at 8 a.m. Eastern. But aside from that, sir, where can they find you? What do you have going on?
Find me on Instagram or on TikTok. And what do I have going on? I'm about to launch a winter enrollment for my anxiety coaching program, which is a 12-week program to help people heal from anxiety and experience all the growth and evolution that we've been talking about in this series lately. So if you want more info on that, find me on Instagram.
Yeah, and I will link Josh in the description, so you will be able to tap on over there to his Instagram, and then also to find him on TikTok or wherever you like to hang out. So that's it. That's all we have today. Sidebar, main bar is the last day for enrollment for my fall enrollment of my 12-week program. Should have someone told me, where I talk about not only evolution but also self-discovery, a life redesign, and then also your future focus formula to keep you moving forward, even when you don't want to, because let's face it, we have those days. So if you're interested in that, today is the last day to apply. Go ahead to the link in my bio where you can do that. It expires at midnight. You will no longer be able to apply. So if you're curious, even if you're kind of like, well, maybe, go ahead, apply. I will review your application personally. And if I'm like, yes, we could totally, let's do this, I will invite you to a conversation. Otherwise, I will send you some resources that I feel would support you right here and now. So that is it. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have an amazing weekend, and we'll see you on the screens. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.